We can now bring in our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, great to see you. We often talk about migrant boats capsizing, but the scale of this seems enormous.
That's the whole tragedy about this, Delano, is that these stories are happening every day. There are boats going out all the time, either across the Mediterranean, either across the English Channel. And 9 times out of 10, we never hear about them. We don't talk about them, and people that die on a daily basis. It's only when you have a story that's this big with dozens of people who die that it actually makes the headlines. There are several routes which these migrants are attempting to take. You can see the Mediterranean on the map behind me. There are a couple of big routes in the Mediterranean from Libya and from Tunisia, which go to Greece and to Italy. They are the most deadly routes because they are travelling along a much wider expanse of sea. There's also a much smaller route through the Strait of Gibraltar into Spain. It's a lot more complicated to get in that way. It's often deemed to be easier going across the Mediterranean to Italy or to Greece. And there's another route which has seen a huge increase in the number of migrants trying to flee into Europe. That's through the Balkans, through Turkey, and then across the sea into Greece, Greece being in the European Union, that being the first port of call for those migrants. What we're seeing here is a general increase in migration over the past year, particularly in 2022. We've seen 330,000 irregular border crossings, more than we would have done. That 64% increase, a 64% increase in the number of migrants attempting to get into Europe, most of them coming from Syria, from Afghanistan, and from Tunisia. That is because in many of those countries, young people feel they don't have a future, they don't have the prospect of getting a job, they don't believe in their government, they don't believe in the economy, and they say that the only way to get a bright future is to go to Europe. They will risk everything, as we've seen, to get there, like aboard this ship, with no life jacket, having probably paid people smugglers a vast amount of money to get on board, and it all ends in a disaster with their deaths in the middle of the sea.
Philip, migration has been one of those issues the EU has failed to tackle. They have tried but each state, it's difficult to get everyone on board. Let's talk about measures which the EU has taken, because this past week they clinched a deal with Tunisia. What does that entail?
Okay, there are several points here. The first one is that, yes, you're right, the EU doesn't agree on what the main thing to do is. First of all, the countries in the south, notably Greece and Italy, are complaining that countries in the north aren't doing enough. And countries, particularly Poland and Hungary and some East European countries, who refuse to take on board any responsibility for the migrant crisis. So already there's been a disagreement within the EU itself about what is best to do. The EU say that it is moving forward. It has made a breakthrough in negotiations on a new form of policy to deal with the migrant crisis. So the EU is now introducing a new policy, an offer to Tunisia of €1 billion to help Tunisians deal with the crisis. That basically means that the EU is going to pay Tunisia to improve its economy, to give people the hope that they could get a job in Tunisia and not come to Europe to try to seek employment, to make it more make their lives seem better if they're in Tunisia than coming overseas to seek a life somewhere where they'd be an illegal migrant, and also to step up the surveillance of the coastline by bringing in more border guards, more sea vessels, to make sure that these dinghies and these boats, these very unsafe vessels, are allowed to sail across the Mediterranean. We've heard all of this before several times, Delano. Will this make any effect? Well, we don't know. I think that what the EU is saying is we have to try to invest money in the countries where the migrants are coming from, so the migrants will not want to come so much to Europe. That seems to be the message that they're putting across. On the other hand, you have all these migrants coming into Europe and then wanting to get to the United Kingdom, who are on beaches up in Calais. The approach by the UK is totally different. The UK is saying, don't come here. We are tightening the legislation. If you do come to the UK under this new migrant bill that we're introducing, and you're caught as an illegal migrant, you will be sent to a safe country, maybe Rwanda, and you will never be allowed to come back again. So the message coming from the UK is, don't even try to come here. There are safe ways to apply for asylum. Don't come in as an illegal migrant, because you won't make it. You'll be sent somewhere else and you'll never have the chance to come back. The message from the EU is invest money in the countries where they're coming from to make the EU seem slightly less attractive.